Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. I mean, we always have call and response. This is the way of African people, so we don't just sit and not say anything, you know. Uh, so once again, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to once again host our annual Dr. Martin Luther King Day celebration and slash Malcolm. We are now instituting a separate day for Malcolm, which we've been planning to do for a long, long time. We just haven't had the venue to do it. And sometimes it's like that, finding a room to be able to do it in because of all of the other organizations on campus grabbing up the room. So, but we're going to do this, have a separate day for Malcolm in the future. And we have done separate things for Malcolm, but not in the formal venue that we have today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. James Conyers. People know me here as Brother James. I am the Director of Africana Studies at Kane University, and I've been here for a long time. You know, very, very long time. And I'm going to make this very, very short because you have most of what you need to have in our little program here. And in the interest of time, I'm going to get right into introducing our guest speaker, who's someone very, very important. He's become my brother over a number of years now. I mean, I don't know how, it's been quite some time now. And we've had a number of associations. He's invited me places. I've invited him places. And I consider him not only my brother, but one of my mentors. And someone who mentored him was also my mentor indirectly, because I studied the philosophy and I actually saw the person. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that today. First and foremost, let me just read a little bit of the bio of our speaker. Our speaker is A. Peter Bailey. He's an acclaimed author, journalist, and lecturer. Peter Bailey was a founding member of the Organization of African American Unity, the OAAU, organized in 1964 by Brother Malcolm X. Bailey was the editor of the OAAU newsletter, Backlash. He was one of the few persons to speak with Brother Malcolm on the day of assassination, February 21st, 1965, and served as one of the pallbearers at his funeral. He has contributed to numerous books, articles, and documentaries about the celebrated leader. Bailey lectured at over 35 colleges and universities throughout the country on Brother Malcolm X, probably more than that by now, on Brother Malcolm X. He has also lectured on Harlem, the civil rights movement, the black press, and several other topics in which he draws from his vast reservoir of historical and cultural knowledge and uses his powerful voice to inform, educate, and inspire. Let me just stop for a minute. And I can't remember the exact name of the film, Peter, so maybe when you come up, you can say that. There is a new film, documentary on Malcolm that I saw a couple of weeks ago at the film festival at Columbia University's Teachers College. And I would advise, Peter informed me earlier that film is traveling around. But if you get a chance to see it, Peter's in the film, please see that film. I learned so much about Malcolm and about the events around Malcolm that I did not know, and I thought I knew a whole lot. And it showed me that I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. So please, when you get a chance, see that film. Bailey, a former editor of Ebony Magazine, is the author of Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, The Master Teacher, a memoir, Harlem Precious Memories, Great Expectations, co-author of The Revelations, the autobiography of Alvin Ailey, with Alvin Ailey, and co-author of The Seventh Child, a family memoir, with Rodnell P. Collins, the nephew of Malcolm X. So without further ado, let's bring up our good brother, our friend, our mentor, our scholar, Peter Bailey.
Okay. Thanks, James, for that introduction. And I'm glad to be here again at Kane University. I've been here a couple of times before, and was glad when I was contacted about coming back again. What I basically want to kind of talk about today is, especially to the young people, is that you all, I think the Martin Luther King that you all hear about and celebrate and talk about is really just a small part of the real Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I think I'm going to have some information to give you today to back that up. And also, the Dr. King that you all hear about, to me, has been reduced, and I'm using the word deliberately, reduced to I Have a Dream. I personally will not go to any program around Dr. King that has the word dream in it. I will not attend any program that has the word dream in it, and I will not do so because I believe that that's what they have done to this brother, and kind of just, and I think they did it to get that holiday. I think his people went along with it to get that holiday. I think, I read in the Washington Post in 2013. In 2013, the Washington Post ran a long article around the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And in that article, it said that as a result of Dr. King's March on Washington speech, the FBI launched one of the biggest surveillance operations in its history. Now, I want to know why J. Edgar Hoover would launch a major surveillance operation from his reaction to that speech, if it was just, I have a dream. And of course, when you go, I don't know how many of you ever read the entire speech or have seen Dr. King present that speech, and you will understand that he said much more and much more important things that day than I have a dream. And when you see the entire speech and some of the things, I'm going to read a couple of them today, it will explain why J. Edgar Hoover felt the way he did. I'm as a Malcolmite, and that's what I call myself, a Malcolmite. Back in those days, I was in my 20s, my mid 20s, and of course, like a lot of people, we thought if you liked Brother Malcolm, you couldn't like Dr. King. That was it. It was one or the other. And if you and then of course the King people felt the same way. If you like Dr. King, you cannot in any kind of way support or be involved with Brother Malcolm. But as I have gone over the years and began to really read and hear and begin to think about some of the things that Brother Malcolm did, that to show us that that's a very, very wrong position to take. It is a wrong position to take. Most people don't know that he actually went down to Selma in that documentary that you're talking about. Brother Malcolm went to Selma when Dr. King was in jail. The King people had sent out a notice. They wanted a lot of people with national reputations to come to Selma because they were afraid that they might try to kill him while he was in jail. And they figured that if they would get a lot of people with, who had national reputations to come down there, that the authority would be hesitant about doing any harm to Dr. King. Brother Malcolm, who had spoke at Tuskegee University, by the way, that's my hometown, Tuskegee, Alabama. But Brother Malcolm had spoke there, and he heard about this, and he went to Selma. And of course, they would not let him see Dr. King. They would not let him see Dr. King, but he did speak. The SCLC headquarters was called Brown's Chapel in Selma. And I met W. Bernard Lafayette, who was one of Dr. King's top aides at the time. And he said that when they heard Brother Malcolm was coming to Selma, they kind of debated back and forth whether they were going to let him speak. And Bernard Lafayette said, well, finally we decided that it would cost us more to not let him speak than it would to let him speak. But they were scared to death about what he was going to say. And Brother Malcolm gave a speech in which he talked about his international policy, and the reaction was incredible. When in this documentary, you will see there was a man there at the time. He was 16 years old. His family had a big farm in Lowndes County, Alabama, which was in the county next to the county that Selma was. I think Selma is in Dallas County, and next county is Lowndes County. Well, Lowndes County was the headquarters for SNCC. And this brother had this big farm there, and this man who we met when we went down in May 2016, shooting this documentary. He said that the man he said to us, he said, I was 16 years old at the time. He said, my daddy went to hear Malcolm X speak at Brown's Chapel that night, and he came home a changed man. He came home a changed man. He said he immediately offered. They had a house on their farm to SNCC. And that became SNCC's headquarters in Lowndes County. The house is still there, has newspaper clippings and photographs and things on the walls, but it still sits there on that farm. But that was a direct something that happened because Brother Malcolm was there. A funny account came from a woman named Joanne Bland. Joanne was 11 years old at the time. She actually marched on Bloody Sunday in Selma. And she said that, only reason she wasn't beaten is when she fell, when the police attacked them, her 14-year-old sister fell on top of her to protect her. And her sister still has a knot on her head from the beating that she took. But Joanne said that she said that, when I heard Malcolm X was speaking, now don't forget now, she's 11 years old. She said, I heard Malcolm X was speaking. I wanted to go hear him because I heard all he talked about, he wanted to kill all the white people. And she said, I went to hear him speak, and when he didn't say that, I was disappointed. She went to hear him speak because of what she had heard about him. And she was disappointed when she didn't get that kind of speech from him. But I'm saying this to show you that his influence impact was outside of just what you all normally hear about him. This whole relationship between him and Dr. King. Now, I'm not going to claim by any moments as I talk that these two brothers would ever been homeboys. I really don't know that. But I really truly believe they would have developed a working relationship with each other because they both were committed. They had a commitment to the cause, a commitment to the cause. And because of that commitment, I think that they would have found some kind of way to work with each other, in particular areas. And I say this because after reading Dr. King's book, by the way, how many people here have heard of the book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Anyone heard of that book? This is Dr. King's last book. It was published in 1967, about a year before he was assassinated. And when I read that book, I began to realize that I had kind of a wrong look at Dr. King. Now, someone just told me recently that, Dr. King didn't write that book. It was written by one of his aides, and he approved it. Well, my opinion, if he approved it, then that's his book, because he could have stopped the book. I'm going to read you some excerpts from that book today. Where do we go from here? Chaos or Community. And I have, I teach as an adjunct professor at the University of District of Columbia, and I have asked my students, who said this when I read it? And they say, oh, Malcolm X. I said, no, that's Dr. King. That's Dr. King talking. But see, they find it hard to believe because all they know is I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. One person who was aware and who, in my opinion, had a great fear of any serious connection between these two brothers was Mr. J. Edgar Hoover himself. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever heard, there's a book called Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover by a British writer named Anthony Summers. And in this book, Summers he mentions Brother Malcolm one time in the entire book. He talks quite a bit about the FBI going after Dr. King. But he only mentions Brother Malcolm one time in the entire book on page 352. But here's what he says in this book. He says, he quotes J. Edgar Hoover as speaking in a luncheon meeting with then Senator Lyndon Johnson. He quotes J. Edgar Hoover as saying, we wouldn't have any problem if we could get those two guys fighting and we could get them to kill one another off. Those two guys were Brother Malcolm and Dr. King. Now, this is a statement made by J. Edgar Hoover to then Senator. So it had to be before 1960, because Johnson became vice president in 1960 with Kennedy, when Kennedy was elected. So, but he said that he was talking to then Senator Lyndon Johnson, which means that we must be talking about maybe the late 1950s. And this is a quote that Summer made. We would not have any problem. We could get those two guys fighting, and we could get them to kill one another off. That's a statement by J. Edgar Hoover in the book that Anthony Summers wrote. And I'm letting you all know that because this shows you that Hoover feared two people. Excuse me just a minute. I have a family situation that I got that's going on that I have to deal with. I have to take this call. I'm sorry about that. But Hoover feared these two men. Because, and right away, those people from Brother Malcolm's side who criticized Dr. King, and those people from Dr. King's side who criticized Brother Malcolm, I always bring this up to them. I say, why did he say that about these two men? Why were these two men assassinated? Why did the FBI launch major campaigns? Because he saw them as probably the two people who had the possibility of organizing a serious national movement. A serious national movement. You know, not like we have today where everybody got their little enclave, but he saw the possibility, and he was very, very concerned about that. And that is why I believe that he made that statement to then Senator Lyndon Johnson. And again, why I think that this kind of thing between the Malcolm X folks and Martin Luther King folks should stop. It should stop. And people begin to pay attention that there's a reason that J. Edgar Hoover responded that way about these two men. Now, most people don't know. They talk about Brother Malcolm made these big changes, you know, after he left the Nation of Islam, and he did make some major changes in some of his attitudes, because you know he had been very harshly critical of the civil rights leadership many times when he was in the nation. But even then, in my memoir, I got a letter from 1963 that Brother Malcolm wrote, and he sent it to all of the major civil rights leaders, including Dr. King. And he basically said to them that if communist Khrushchev and capitalist Kennedy can get together and sit down and discuss important issues, then why can't we do the same thing? Why can't black leaders in this country, he's talking about now, this is 1960 now, why can't we sit down together and do the same thing? He said we have a common enemy. So why can't, and he did this while he was in the Nation of Islam. Because he continued this even more so after he left the Nation of Islam. But the point I want to make here is there's this whole idea that he was very hostile towards Dr. King and the civil rights leadership is something that is just simply, you know, is not true. He said to them, if you come, we're having a rally in Harlem. I'm inviting you to come to this rally. I guarantee you will be treated with respect. I guarantee you'll be treated with respect. We usually get 5,000 people at these rallies, and if you come, you'll have a chance to speak to people who you might not normally have an opportunity to hear you speak. Now, this is a letter that he wrote. I have the entire letter in my memoir to the civil rights leadership in 1963. Again, you never know that when you talk about it. All you hear, oh, he hated, he talked about them, he did this and that. And there was some time he said some particularly harsh things about them. There's no doubt about that. When he felt as though they were not doing the right thing in terms of what he considered the overall of black people. But he understood the importance if capitalistic Kennedy and communistic Khrushchev can sit down and talk, why can't we? By the way, not a single civil rights leader in 1963 even responded to the letter. Not a single one. And so then we get up to Dr. King, and where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And I'm going to read you a couple of things that Dr. King says in that I would be willing to grant you that you have not heard very much when you hear about Dr. King, when you were taught about him in school, what you hear about him during the big celebrations. And by the way, I'm one of these people, I'm really anxious to see what's going to happen this year on April the 4th, which will be the 50th anniversary of the assassination. It comes and goes, and nobody says the word. I ask my students, what happened April 4th? They don't know. Because there's no commemoration of that day when he was assassinated. Now, of course, this year, April 4th, will be the 50th anniversary of his assassination. And I'm very, very curious as to how this is going to be handled in this country. How this is going to be handled, the 50th anniversary of the assassination. Because I believe, and I haven't done any scientific survey, that to get that holiday, the King people agreed, one, to reduce the brother to I Have a Dream, and two, to make no big deal about April the 4th. Because April 4th comes and goes and nobody ever talks about it. I can't ask the question now because people probably won't answer, but I wish I had asked the question ahead of time. How many people here really know what happened on April the 4th? Because my students don't, many of them. And I've taught a whole bunch of students through the years at University of District of Columbia. And many of them, they do not know what happened on April the 4th because you don't hear hardly anything about it. It just comes every year and goes. We have some kind of programs around February 21st, around the assassination of Brother Malcolm, every year, all over the country. There are Malcolmites who have programs, because we're not going to forget February 21st, 1965. We're not going to forget it. And but I'm just really going to be very curious to see what's going to happen this year around April 4th, 2018. Now, and King says from the March on Washington speech, I'm going to read you two quotes, and I'm going to read them because I want to make sure you get them exactly as he said. He says, in a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architect of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the rights of freedom and the security of justice. The government gave us a promissory note, and we've come here today to cash that check. How many of you have heard that as a statement from Dr. King at the March on Washington speech? You're a civil rights scholar, so I know you heard it. See? The government gave us a promissory note, and we have come here today to cash that check. Now, to me, if you want to have a statement out of that speech that becomes like the trademark, that would be it. That would be it. But all of you have never heard it. Another thing from that speech. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam, he's talking about some of the uprisings that had occurred in cities. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwind of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. Does that sound like the Martin Luther King that y'all know? Does that sound like the Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, I have a dream king? That sounds more like Malcolm X. That's what Hoover paid attention to, which is why he launched that surveillance operation after that speech. He heard about cashing the check, and there would be no peace and tranquility. Hoover was listening. That's why he launched. Now, I'm sure the Washington Post knew this years ago, but they finally printed it in 2013 when they did this article on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington speech. Again, Martin Luther. Now, by the way, because shared concept of Brother Malcolm and Dr. King, Brother Malcolm would agree with every word Dr. King said here. Now, he went to the March on Washington. And that's what time, of course, when he was being radical. So he called it the farce on Washington, because he said they were told to get in and be out by nightfall. Now, really, they were. I mean, that's the bottom line. Get in, do your little thing, but make sure you're out of D.C. by the time it get dark. I went to the March on Washington as a Malcolmite. I had not met him then at that time. But I had already had become a follower and a supporter. So, of course, I took a bus down. I was living in Harlem then. I went down with a bus full of folks. And to us, we just walked around and looked, and we thought it was like a big joke. Because we did not pay sufficient attention to Dr. King's speech. It was only years later that I read that speech in full. And it was even after that I saw him give the speech. When Dr. King, y'all, gave that speech that day, I watched he didn't crack one smile throughout the entire speech. Not a smile. You ever get a chance to see him do that March on Washington speech? You watch. He's looking very serious. He is not playing. There was no smiles and no that. He was very serious in presenting that speech. And again, he's not. Brother was more than dreaming. He was doing more than dreaming. Here's what he had to say. How many Negroes who have achieved educational and economic security have forgotten that they are what they are because of the support of faceless, unlettered, and unheralded Negroes who did ordinary jobs in an extraordinary way? How many successful Negroes have forgotten that the uneducated and poverty-stricken mothers and fathers often worked until their eyebrows were scorched and their heads bruised so that their children could get an education? For any middle-class Negro to forget the masses is an act not only of neglect, but of shameless ingratitude. It is time for the Negro middle class to rise up from its stool of indifference, to retreat from its flight into unreality, and to bring its full resources, its heart, its mind, and its checkbook to the aid of the less fortunate brother. The salvation of the Negro middle class is ultimately dependent upon the salvation of the Negro masses. That's Dr. King, y'all. That's Martin Luther King talking. Y'all don't know about this Dr. King? I have a dream. This is this is a look at the black leadership, the black middle class. He's calling them to task, just the way Brother Malcolm did. He said you got to bring your hearts, your minds, and your checkbook to the cause. In another part of what do we go from here, community of chaos, he said that black folks who refuse to do the things that they are supposed to do should be scorned by the black community. Should be scorned. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but the word scorn was in there for not doing what they're supposed to be doing to advance the interests of the group. This is Dr. King, y'all. Y'all need to know this Dr. King if you're going to be teaching the real situation about this man. The thing that he just said, Brother Malcolm would have had like a total agreement with. There would have been no argument with him about that. Oh yeah. So I'm going to give you the exact word I found. The exact words that Brother Malcolm said in that letter. He said, if capitalistic Kennedy and communistic Khrushchev can find something in common on which to form a united front despite their tremendous ideological differences, it is a disgrace for Negro leaders not to be able to submerge our minor differences in order to seek a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. 2 previous rallies this summer at the same location attracted 5,000 to 7,000 Harlemites, respectively. We expect our largest crowd this time, rain or shine. We are inviting several Negro leaders to give them their analysis of the present race problem and also their solutions. We will also explain Mr. Muhammad's solution. There will be no debating, arguing, criticizing, or condemning. I will moderate the meeting and guarantee order and courtesy for all speakers. It will give you a chance to present your views to the largest and most explosive elements in metropolitan New York. Not a single civil rights leader accepted that invitation. I did that again because I wanted to give you the exact words. This was done in 1963. He made this appeal to the civil rights leadership. None of them responded. So it shows you that this type of hostile type thing that is often presented between Brother Malcolm and the civil rights leadership is simply not the whole case. He did have some harsh things to say about him, just as they had some harsh things to say about him. But as he said, Khrushchev had some harsh things to say about Kennedy, Kennedy about Khrushchev. But on certain issues, they sat down and talked, because they realized that they were in a position to maybe destroy the world. So they had to sit down and get this thing straightened out, or do something to make sure that this did not happen. Now, here's a subject in which Dr. King is speaking in his book that I know y'all have never heard associated with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Black power. I bet most people probably think that Dr. King never uttered those words in his entire life. Never uttered the words black power. Here's what he had to say, and where do we go from here, KSI community. Black power is also a call for the pooling of black financial resources to achieve economic security. While the ultimate answer to the Negro's economic dilemma will be found in a massive federal program for all the poor along the lines of A. Philip Randolph's Freedom Budget, a kind of Marshall Plan for the disadvantaged, there's something that the Negro himself can do to throw off the shackles of poverty. Although the Negro is still at the bottom of the economic ladder, his collective annual income is upward $30 billion. This gives him a considerable buying power that can make the difference between profit and loss in many businesses. Through the pooling of such resources and the development of habits of thrift and techniques of wise investments, the Negro will be doing his share to grapple with his problem of economic deprivation. If black power means the development of this kind of strength and within the Negro community, then it is a quest for basic, necessary, legitimate power. Is anyone out there aware that Dr. King said something like that? Have you all ever heard Dr. King talk about that? No, because the decision was made, and I think that, unfortunately, that the King supporters probably went along with it. Keep everything about Dr. Martin Luther King on I Have a Dream. This book was published in 1967. Less than a year before he was assassinated. So you have to assume that this is where he was at the time of his assassination. When you look at this stuff, you get a whole different picture. Brother Malcolm had an international policy. Most of you may not be aware that during that last 15 months of his life, he was trying to develop a situation where the United States government could be taken before the UN Commission on Human Rights for being either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of black people in this country. That's why the OAAU, our organization, we called it a human rights organization, not a civil rights organization, because human rights is the international term. He went to Africa. He did several things. He laid groundwork. In my memoir, I include a whole statement he issued to the African leaders at the OAU conference in 1964 in Cairo, where he had been invited as an observer, not as a participant, but as an observer. And he went and he presented this long document to them, stating his position. Basically what he's saying was, y'all ain't going nowhere without us, and we ain't going nowhere without y'all. So people of African descent in the United States and African people on the continent, we need to work together, because neither one of us is going anywhere without the other. That was the basic thrust of what he was saying. And he was seeking support. Dr. John Henry Clark told me later that he had gotten 6 African countries that had agreed to do this, because he couldn't take it himself. An individual could not go before the UN Commission on Human Rights. You had to get a country, a UN member, to do it. He had gotten 6 African countries who had agreed to do it. And there were several more who were leaning. Now, think folks, this is 1964, the height of the so-called Cold War. This country is involved in a tremendous propaganda war with Russia. People call it the Soviet Union. I use Russia, because that's basically what it was, Russia. If the United States had we know the United States could have told the UN, hey, go take a long, long walk off a short pier and leave me alone. But the propaganda blow would have been devastating if he had been successful in doing this. And that he was having some success is evidenced by a statement in 1964 when the United States, Belgium, and England invaded the Congo, quote unquote, to save some white nuns who were going to be attacked by these African savages. Of course, we don't talk about the copper that the Congo was full of. So, when they had the UN debate about that in December 1964, there were debates at the UN around this whole incident. 2 African diplomats, for the first time in history, got up and said, basically, if the United States can go into the Congo militarily to support these nuns, who's to say that we don't have the right to provide support for the black people who are being killed in Mississippi? This was unheard of. The New York Herald Tribune, which was a very conservative newspaper in New York at the time, said that Allied Stevenson, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, and the other Western ambassadors were astounded when these African leaders made that connection. They made that connection because of what the groundwork laid by Brother Malcolm. That's how they made that connection, because he had been for almost a year now talking to them, visiting Africa. And here's the key thing. I heard from a very close King aide that Dr. King had sent word to Brother Malcolm quietly, I'm not going to get involved in that, but if you're successful, I will back it. I will back it, this effort to take the U.S. government before the UN Commission on Human Rights. That's serious. J. Edgar Hoover. We wouldn't have any problem if we get those 2 guys to fighting, if we could get them to kill one another off. And instead of them fighting, Hoover was afraid they might be slowly, very slowly, moving to some kind of working relationship. They weren't fighting each other. That had kind of almost totally ceased doing that. That's what Hoover was afraid of. You know, when Dr. King sent that word, I'm not going to get it, but if you get it, I'm going to back it. This is the kind of thing that is not known. Someone wants to interview me on Brother Malcolm, and I told him I will only do an interview where I'm going to talk solely about what he was doing internationally. Because if you don't want to deal with that, you will not know why the United States government had him at the top of that list to get rid of. Now, I know that members of the Nation of Islam did the actual shooting, but they were told, basically, you do it, nobody will be punished, and nobody was. The only guy who got punished was the guy who got caught. And he got caught only because one of the guys in our group had disobeyed Brother Malcolm, had his pistol and shot him in the leg, so he got caught. If he had gotten away, I doubt if there ever would have been a trial. The other 4 guys who were part of the assassination, they picked up 2 Muslim guys, put them in jail for 20 years for something they didn't do. The other 4 guys who were actually involved, none of them were ever punished. That's what they were told. Do it, nothing will happen to you. And I would believe till the day I died that if the 5th guy had gotten away, had not got shot in the leg, so he got caught by the crowd, and then they took him and put him in a police car and they took him away. If he had gotten away, there never would have been a trial. Because when they called me in for questioning, all they were asking me was they were trying to find out whether I believed the official story they were putting out. They really didn't ask me no questions, as though they were trying to find out what really happened. All the questions were like, basically they were asking me, trying to see if I believe what they would do, the kind of story that they were putting out. And of course, having to work with Brother Malcolm, I knew just how to talk to them. And I would just throw everything about. I said, yeah, but that's what you said. That's what you said. You said so and so and so and so and so and so and so. They did the whole good cop, bad cop routine. The young guy was screaming at me and jumping all in my face. The older guy would say, oh, he's going to be okay. He's going to be cooperative type thing. And I wanted to say to them so bad, Brother Malcolm warned us about y'all. So that, that old bad cop is not going to work here. It's not going to work. But the key thing, folks, is that, brother, and I got this from a reliable King supporter, that he had sent word to Brother Malcolm, if you can get this done, I will back it. I will back it. This is another one of those instances where those brothers, a relationship between them coming closer, working together, doing things together, was J. Edgar Hoover's, was one of J. Edgar Hoover's worst nightmares. He was very, very concerned about that. And you notice, since those 2 guys did not fight each other and kill one another off, you notice that those 2 guys were eventually no longer around. One assassinated February 21st, 1965, the other April 4th, 1968. Very, very important to understand, folks. There was a shared connection between these 2 brothers. As I said before, I don't know if they ever would have been homeboys or best buddies or BFFs, or whatever they call it, best friend or whatever they call it. But I think they would have developed a serious working relationship with each other that would have been powerful had it come off. Would have been powerful, because they both had the ability to attract people across class lines, color lines, all those other things that divide the black community. They had the ability to attract people across those lines. Both of them had that ability. Most people don't know, Brother Malcolm, there were some very, very prominent black, quote unquote, middle class people in this country who were supporting him. They didn't do it publicly, but that's how he was able to travel, because they were providing him with funds to travel when he spent most of that last year traveling in Africa, trying to set up his international thing. I met some of them, and I was kind of like, ooh. When I said, this, because I was, like I'm in my mid-20s then, so we got those bougie. In fact, Brother Malcolm said this one day, we were talking about these bougie Negroes, blah, 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 blah. And he said, y'all, if y'all just knew some of the folks, who've been helping me out, y'all would need to stop that stuff. You know what I mean? We were all like, many of us were in our 20s. So we had this, those bougie Negroes And some of those ones who we call him were some of the ones who were helping him. And he never told us their names, but he told us to be, we need to be a little bit more careful in our, putting folks down without knowing some more of the details about what was going on. So I just want to say that I think that these two brothers, there's a reason that they were eliminated. There was a reason that they are both, their contributions, their achievements, their legacies are distorted. They've distorted Brother Malcolm in one way by trying to act like he was some kind of advocating violence. When I go and speak and someone says, oh, Malcolm X, I said, man, if you can find one place, I've been saying this for 30 years, where Brother Malcolm said that black people should go out and start shooting white people and beating up on white people, I'll give you $100. I haven't to pay it yet. Because you're not going to find it. He believed in self-defense. That was presented in the New York City newspapers as advocating violence. Advocating violence. Even in Summers, in the book where he uses the Hoover quote, he says that Brother Malcolm was violent. The one time he mentions him in the book. So I think that it is very important to understand that these two brothers believed, were committed, could have stopped at any time. I've written a play called Malcolm Martin Medgar, in which the three of them, Medgar Evers, the third person, are in the hereafter, and they're looking down and commenting on things that have happened since their assassinations. And one of the things they asked themselves in the play that I've written is, did we have the right, even for a righteous cause, to leave 13 babies fatherless? Between the three of them, they had 13 children, and they discussed that among themselves. And then a question I have at the end of the play is, have black people as a group proven worthy of the supreme sacrifice made by those three brothers and others? Because my position is that we haven't. I wish Brother Malcolm to take one of those jobs he was offered in Africa to teach and done it, because we have not proven worthy of the sacrifices they made. When you see some of the stuff that is going on in our community today, and some of the things that we're doing to each other, and some of the ridiculous positions that we're taking on various issues, and the apathy, the refusal to follow what either one of these men was advocating, using collective financial resources. We don't do that. Everybody does his own thing. There are some people now, not everybody now, of course. There are people who are doing it small all around the country, but as a group, the total group, we're not doing what Dr. King said. Not Brother Malcolm, of course, said that too, but Dr. King said that. I just read you that statement. Pooling financial resources. That does not mean that you not demand your equal share of government monies. The government gives out money, make sure we get our share because we pay taxes too. But that means that you don't be totally dependent on government money for every single thing that you do, because that you're not going very well by doing that. Because they always threaten to cut off the money if you do this, or cut off the money if you do that. And these two brothers understood that. So I'm going to just close by saying that I hope that I've given you at least some introduction as to why I believe that these brothers had some shared concepts, and why I believe that the two of them were assassinated because of the fear of what they could possibly do in terms of building a national type of unity movement. I truly believe that. And as we celebrate Dr. King's birthday, celebrate his birthday and hopefully commemorate his assassination, and celebrate Brother Malcolm's birthday, May 19, 1925, and commemorate his assassination, February 21st, 1965. Let's make sure that we're doing the real person, not the person that has been given to us too often in school textbooks and in television programs and in newspaper articles and those kind of things. Let's make sure that we are paying tribute to the real Dr. Martin Luther King and the real Brother Malcolm X. Thank you very much.
Well, we have some time for questions, and I'm sure you have some, and we're going to let Peter field some of those questions. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you so much, Peter, for coming once again. I mean, I always love when Peter comes, and whether he's up here speaking or when we talk in private, I learn so much. I'm just so happy and proud that I've had I've been fortunate enough to be around Peter, to have been around Malcolm. I didn't know Malcolm, but I've saw him quite often, and to have a teacher like Dr. John Henry Clark, who was my teacher, and many, many others, it's just, I feel blessed. And I just want to say one thing before Peter answers the questions. I told Peter this, and I say this quite often. I've also told Ilyasha Shabazz and others, because we were on a panel together with Les Payne at Clark House not too long ago. When I first saw Malcolm, I was 12 years old, and would you believe it, I was up in Harlem, because my relatives lived in Harlem, even though I grew up on the Lower East Side. And at 12 years old, I was kind of streetwise, and I was up in Harlem to buy myself, I had saved up enough money to buy myself a pair of Lizard shoes. And back in those days, I don't know what year that was, 1962, or whatever it was, Lizard shoes cost $60. Now, you can imagine a 12-year-old boy wanting a pair of $60 shoes, but that was fashionable, a pair of sharkskin pants. And, if you had one thing, you didn't have the other thing. So if I had the shoes, I didn't have the pants. If I had the pants, I didn't have the shirt. If I had the shirt, I didn't have that, So I'm coming around the corner on 125th Street, and the Teresa Hotel was there, and I figured I'd stop and see my godmother. I don't know if Peter remembers it. The millinery shop right at the base of the Hotel Teresa was owned by my godmother. Her name was Cleo Sims. And if you see any of the old pictures, that's where was her shop. You remember Cleo Sims, right? I'm coming around the corner, and there's this man up on the podium, and back in those days, people used to even speak on, soapboxes, still in Harlem, and you'd see that all over. And here's this man who I didn't know who he was, up on this podium with a whole crowd in front of him, talking some heavy stuff. Whatever he was talking about, I didn't understand, but I knew it was important. It was having an influence on me, because he was answering questions by his speech that I had that no one had ever answered. So after it was all over and everybody was dispersing, and the nation and all of that, I asked this man in the crowd, I said, well, excuse me, mister. I said, well, who was that? And the man said, that was Mr. X. I didn't know the Malcolm part yet. That came about some time later, but that was the beginning of it. Shortly thereafter, I was still 12 years old. I met Dr. John Henry Clark, who had done a lecture down on the Lower East Side. In fact, I had a place called DeWitt Church. Dr. James Turner and I often talk about this, down at DeWitt Church, and that was the beginning of my being involved in African studies. So thanks to Malcolm and Dr. John Henry Clark and Peter Bailey and all these other folks, I've become involved in this, and I've maintained it through ups and downs all the days of my life up until this point, and I don't see any point that I'll ever stop doing it. So with that being said, if you have any questions for Peter, he'll take those. Any questions? No one has any questions? Okay. Hold on, Peter. Let me give her the microphone.
Okay.
Is this one working? Can someone turn this? Okay.
Testing.
Yeah.
My question is, today, 2018, do you see anyone who may have the characteristics or the traits of being a leader?
When I say, you mean like a national leader?
National leader.
Who can organize?
Yes.
The only person that I have seen in the last, let's say 25 or 30 years who could do that was Reverend Jeremiah Wright. And he was hampered. He was hampered by the election of President Obama, because he had to literally almost become quiet, because everything he said would be used against President Obama. And so he used to come to Howard. I live not too far from Howard University, and he would come to Howard every day on Martin Luther King's birthday weekend. He came. This brother had it, man. He had the ability to be a national leader, to really get it. And I can see why this establishment was so jumping on him. I saw him speak. He came 2 Sundays ago, Dr. King's birthday. He came that Sunday. And once again, and you know what he is now? He's in a wheelchair. Left side of it, he had a stroke. The left side of his body is paralyzed. And he still gave it incredible, sitting in the wheelchair. I think he could have been a national leader. There are very few other people. I mean, I can see other people, who can do, specific things in a movement. But if you're talking about a leader, I mean, I try to look around. There probably may be some young people out there that I'm not aware of, that I don't know, and I have to believe that there's somebody out there that's going to be able to move into that position. But from right now, Reverend Jeremiah Wright is the only one that I have seen.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
And I personally, I don't know if anyone, probably, and Peter said this many, many times, and I agree with it, who was the kind of, not only a leader, but the kind of master teacher that Malcolm was.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, at 12 years old, I knew this was something. And I mean, I left there not knowing who I was anymore. I mean, I was somebody else.
Yeah.
When I left, I even asked my godmother in the lobby. I said, going on, and ever since that time, I mean, so many times I've had to, as Peter pointed out, I had to defend Malcolm in terms of people saying he was advocating violence and all of this kind of stuff. All you have to do is listen to his speeches on the records and on tapes. Probably one of the most exciting speeches, on tape, is probably "Message to the Grassroots," maybe, and where he really he talks, and people, Dr. Clark used to say, when Malcolm said it, you understood it the first time.
Yeah. He often, the thing, when people ask me what was it about him, because the first time I heard him speak was in the summer of 1962. I moved to Harlem in the summer of 1962. And I moved to Harlem grudgingly, because I had accepted this image of Harlem that I had heard and read. I did not want to go to Harlem. No way. And the only reason I did it was because a friend of mine, his mother's boyfriend, had an apartment on 142nd Street where he had 8 rooms for $56 a month. It was like a rent control type thing. And he had to go to I think it was Arizona somewhere because of health reasons. And she asked me that I want to rent that apartment. And I said, well, 8 rooms for $56 a month, I'll take my chances on Harlem. And I moved to Harlem. And I moved in on a Friday night. That Saturday morning, rather than unpack my roommate, I decided we were going to walk down Lenox Avenue, which is now called Malcolm X Boulevard, because I don't know how long that's going to last with the changes that's going on in Harlem now. But we got down to 116th Street, and we saw a crowd gathering, and we said, what's going on? They said, Malcolm X is going to speak. Now, at that time, I had only heard of him very vaguely. Usually, type things, believed in violence, and, white people were devils and that kind of thing. So we said, let's hear what he has to say. And he spoke for 3 hours, and on a June afternoon, it was summer, very hot. And we stood there, and by the time he finished, I was a Malcolmite. And the thing that really, more than anything else, that got me to listening to him, I had never heard anyone talk about the attacks on the mind. Usually you hear about physical attacks. Brother Malcolm spent as much time talking about the attacks on the mind. And you never understood. And I remember beginning to think about growing up in Alabama and going to these segregated movie theaters. In Tuskegee, where I grew up, you didn't have like black folks sit in the balcony and white folks sit on the lower level. We had 2 separate movie theaters side by side. White folks went to this and black folks went to this. So every Saturday, we kids would go there. And we'd sit down and movie from like maybe 10 o'clock in the morning to 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, watching all these different, and we saw, always there was at least one Tarzan movie. And we would sit in that movie theater and cheer this European man and his chimpanzee as they beat up on about 40 or 50 African warriors. And we thought the Africans were like ignorant and stupid because when they were with each other, they spoke their language. So we thought they just couldn't talk English. So we would talk about them and laugh at them. These were the attacks, and that goes on to this day. James and I were talking about that. You got black people today, young black people and some older black people, who think that it's cool and okay to use the N-word. That is psychological. Anybody who says that, I don't care who they are, they can have $500 million or $5. If they think that it is okay to use it for black people, use the N-word, they have succumbed to white supremacists' psychological attacks on the mind. I don't care what they say. And to me, that is the biggest problem we face today. Despite the police shootings and that kind of thing, the biggest problem we face today is here. So many black folks have completely succumbed They just don't. They don't even. They don't want people want to go to the movies with me, because I don't just go. To me, I was taught that movies. Every movie has a message. Every book has a message. Every song has a message. Every play has a message. And I'm looking for the message. There's no thing as an innocent song. The Doris Day movies had a message. Blondes. It's the greatest thing in the world to be. You know? And so I learned that from a propagandist who taught myself and about 6 or 7 other young dudes during the late 1960s. He taught us propaganda analysis. And he kind of gave us a more kind of academic type of approach to what Brother Malcolm was teaching us about the attacks on the mind. And you don't hear a single person in a leadership position today who ever talks about psychological warfare. And that is what's going on today. Mary Jane Blige, I mean, she's got an Academy Award nomination. I would not go see that movie because I will not deal with black folks who wear blonde wigs or dye their hair blonde. I will not deal with them. Because that to me is here. I don't care how good they are. I don't care. I'm not going to go see that movie because of that. I have granddaughters. I don't want my granddaughters walking around with dyed blonde hair or blonde wigs on. That's psychological warfare. The use of black as an epithet. You still hear black people say, you can't just be a no good whatever. You got to be a no good black whatever. Now, maybe some of us in here do that. I never heard a white person call another white. Now you might hear somebody say, oh, that person is white trash. The emphasis is on the trash. But I heard a little lady just recently talking to a little boy on the bus. And she said, get your black behind over here.
Every day.
Every day. That's psychological. Use of black as an epithet. And nobody in leadership position at all, nobody talks about that. The only person I've heard since Brother Malcolm who tried to deal with it to some degree was Dr. C. Dolores Tucker when she went after the gangster rap thing. She went after the gangster rap thing. And she was attacked. Tupac Shakur wrote things about her in one of his songs. Snoop Dogg thought they jumped on her. And Suge Knight told her about one time they were recording a record and they were talking about the black bees this and the black bees that and the black bees whatsoever. And then they said, and then we get through the black bees, we're going to deal with the Jew bees. And they were told, no, ain't going to be no Jew bees in this song. Ain't going to be no Jew bees. You can talk about the black bees all you want to. Psychological warfare. And most of us are totally unaware of it. And so we just fall right into it. I mean, to me, if somebody would say one thing we need to do in the black community today, we need to start having somebody on a real level who will start talking to people, young people and old people, about there are things you are doing that shows that you have succumbed to psychological warfare.
Peter, I have a question for you. Before that, I'm going to say something else about what Malcolm did. I often talk, and I did a lecture right out here at the Clock Tower. I usually do one every year for the Pan-African Student Union, their opening, and I did a lecture on the N-word last year. A couple people were here, they left already, they were out there. And it's so deep that as soon as I finished the lecture, explaining all of the things you're explaining right now, as some of the crowd was dispersing, I heard one of the brothers say, man, that N is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, just like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how deep it goes.
Yeah.
Language liberation, when you liberate your language, that's in part helping you to liberate your thoughts.
Of course, yeah.
So language liberation becomes important. I talk about this in all of my classes. I just want to say one thing, and I'm going to ask you a question. Malcolm gave me the courage to go into Michaud's bookstore. Remember Michaud's bookstore?
Yeah.
He used to have a sign out front, for those of you who don't know, in Harlem. It used to say, a house of 1,000,000 books about the Negro. And back in those days, we were terrified, most of us, to hear anything in terms of the accomplishments of African people. I saw that sign, I would hightail it, just get away from that sign. Michaud was the brother of the famous black filmmaker, Oscar Michaud. You know, and one day I happened to go into the bookstore. I got the courage, and by the way, I still have the same 2 books that were given to me. I'm gonna let Peter answer that. Were given to me by Mr. Michaud. I went into the bookstore. Who's in the bookstore? Malcolm X. I'm terrified.
Hello.
You know, terrified. He's in there with 2 guys with bow ties on. I'm terrified. And Mr. Michaud saw me walking. The bookstore was small. Saw me walking around, and he said, "Come here, son."
And I got it on my
And,
phone.
you
I
know,
got it on my phone.
he said, "What is your name?" And of course, nobody then or now calls me James, and they certainly didn't call me Dr. Conyers back then. The name my family gave me that people still call me to this day was Buddy. That's the name I answer to. Outside of here, I'm known as Buddy by family, friends, and everybody else. And so he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Buddy." And he said, he gave me 2 books for free. The 2, I still have them to this day. Unfortunately, he didn't sign them, right? 2 books. J.A. Rogers, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, and A Glorious Age in Africa. And I think that was by Elliot Skinner and Daniel Cho or something like that. I still have those 2 books to this very day. But Malcolm was in the store. I was absolutely terrified of that, but it gave me the courage to go into the store. But my question for Peter is,
He used to go in that store. Mr. Michaud
yeah,
would actually just lock the store and leave him in there, and he stayed among those books all night
Right.
long. He would actually lock,
Right.
and people used to write to him and say, Malcolm X Harlem Bookstore, and everybody, and the mail was delivered. They knew exactly what store they were talking about.
it was right there where the state office building is
Yes,
now.
now.
You know,
125th Street in
Right.
Lincoln.
So-
That was my first black bookstore.
Right.
I'd never been to the black bookstore
But if you had seen
until I
that
went into
sign
that
out
store.
front and you wasn't, boy, it terrified the hell out of me. And he gave me the courage to go in. And that was my first 2 books. I still have those books today, those first 2 books. But anyway, my question for Peter is this. That famous picture of Malcolm and Dr. King shaking hands, can you unpack what you know about that picture for us?
Basically, what I've been told by some Dr. King supporters, they ran into each other in an airport, and they were both rushing. So they shook hands. The picture was taken, and then that was it.
That was it,
Now some
right.
people told me that Brother Malcolm deliberately, saw Dr. King
Right.
and deliberately went over there, and so that picture could be taken.
Right.
And knowing Brother Malcolm would do, I would not be past believing that he did just that, but that he went over and they got that picture. But that was the only time they met, and that was like a very brief handshake in the airport. They both going off on business, and
Because people have made a lot out of that picture, a
Yeah.
lot of things. They were strategizing and they were doing
no,
this.
no,
and
no,
were-
no, no, no,
they
no,
were-
no.
they
They
made a
didn't
lot
have no
of-
time
yeah.
to talk. They
Yeah.
just shook hands and
Yeah.
kept on
And then
moving.
kept on going.
But I have found out that there were people from both groups having very quiet meetings,
Okay.
trying to eventually set up a meeting between the 2 of them where they would actually sit down and talk.
Right. You know, I invite everybody to see this when you can, see this new film of Malcolm. Peter is prominent in the film. Malcolm's daughter, Malak, is in the film. Earl Grant is in the film. There's a whole bunch of people in the film.
Got a lot of primary
Yeah, a lot of sources. And like I said, I learned so much. I'm someone who reads all of this stuff. This is what I do as a historian. And there's no way I could have learned those things unless it came from people who were there. You know?
Tyler, the name of the film is Malcolm X, An Overwhelming Impact on the Black Power Movement.
Right.
And Malcolm X, An Overwhelming Impact on the Black Power Movement. It's going to be a part of the Pan-African Film Festival in L.A. That's going to be between February 8th and the 19th. And it's going to be shown there on the 9th, the 12th, and the 15th. They're shown 3 times at that film festival.
And I've been told it's going to be back at the Columbia University's Teachers College in the next few months or so. That's
Yeah.
what I was told.
Eventually, it's going to be made available
Yeah.
to the public, but right now it's.
I was about to ask, is it available anywhere else to watch? I was going to ask if the film is available anywhere else to watch it online.
Not right now. You might be able to get something online. I guess you would look under the name of Malcolm X, an overwhelming impact on the Black Power movement. Now, the producer of the film, his name is Thomas Muhammad. He's a Muslim brother from Dallas, Texas. He lives in Dallas, Texas. He's the producer of the film. And he swears that the film came about because I refuse, because I won't fly. I stopped flying, and I would not get on the airplane. I missed free trips to London, around the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Brother Malcolm's, the famous Oxford debate. I missed that in 2005, I think it was. And then last year, Brother Malcolm's nephew, with whom I co-wrote Seventh Child, a family memoir of Malcolm X, he's married to a black woman from India. And their daughter was getting married in India last December, not this past December, December 2016. And they wanted me to go and cover the wedding because I'm a journalist by profession. But I said, no, can't go because I won't get on that airplane.
It actually says that in the film. It says Peter Bailey, he wouldn't fly. So we got this bus.
We went on a recreation bus from Washington to Selma, then to Lowndes County, from there all the way back to Dallas. This recreation vehicle.
Well, let me just say this. Anytime Peter puts something together, if you're in the area, please go to it. We actually did. Peter sent me the script. We did a reading here of Malcolm, Martin, and Mega here. And we're going to, with Peter's permission, we're going to do it again. You know, maybe we'll have Peter come, and so we can do that again. It was very, very successful. We even put music to it, you know, and so it was very, very, we had Professor Ernest Wiggins direct it. We had faculty and staff who did the reading, and it was very, very successful. And not too long ago, I don't remember how many years ago, we had Peter put together the anniversary celebration of the founding of the OAU, and I was so honored that he invited me to be one of the presenters.
Yeah.
And we stood on the exact spot, I think it was that Malcolm was assassinated on at the Audubon Ballroom.
Which is now the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz.
Yeah, very, very successful.
Education and Culture Center.
Yeah,
and
so
the part of it that is the center is the part of the Audubon Ballroom where the stage was, where he was assassinated.
Right. And
I had sworn I was never going to set foot in that place again, you know, because of the memories about the assassination. But it is now the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Education and Cultural Center.
yeah, we all gathered and we all presented speeches from various
160th Street, yeah.
people, and it was very, very successful. Are there any other questions? Oh.
I just wanted him to repeat about the film. You said exactly where it would be showing in the month and time. You said in California.
It's going to be shown. There's a film festival in L.A. hosted by Danny Glover called the Pan-African Film Festival, and it's going to be February the 8th to the 19th in Los Angeles, and that film is going to be shown at this film festival on February the 9th, I think February the 12th, and February the 15th. And of course, they want me to come out there, but I'm not going to go because I've been to California twice on the train. It takes 3 days going and 3 days coming back. So I cannot go that far, you know, just for 2 days, then have to come back. And the reason I can't go is because my play is going to get it. I've had readings of my play, but we're getting the first production is going to be February the 22nd at the Arc Theater in Southeast Washington. It's going to be an actual production of the play, Malcolm, Martin, and Medgar. And this will be the first time, up until now, I've had nothing but dramatic readings.
Well, then we're going to have to talk about getting that here, Peter. We'll have to work out something here, you know. We've also had the play, The Meeting here with Michael Green's Black Jay Theater in Harlem. So we've done that a few times. But we're going to, now that you're going to have the actual production, we're going to find a way to do that and get that here. We're going to do a whole lot of different things. We had Jamal Joseph here a few weeks ago, and we're going to do a thing with his film, his new film, and some other things. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much. Okay.
We say to find out the truth about these people. Where do we find the truth about Malcolm X, and where do we find the actual truth? I mean,
Okay,
do we go back to their books, their original books, or?
I can recommend, there's a book called Seventh Child, a family memoir of Malcolm X, which is basically the memoir of his sister Ella Collins, who was the sister who took him in when he was 14 up in Boston. And it's co-written by me and her son, who was his uncle, who was his nephew. I would recommend that book, mainly because that book provides a lot of his family's history. See, people, sometimes people try to give you the impression that when Brother Malcolm went to Mr. Muhammad, that he was some kind of empty vessel, you know, and that Mr. Muhammad took this empty vessel. No, he came from a Garveyite family. His mother and father were Garveyites. You know, his older brother told me that the reason they joined the Nation of Islam was because that organization came closest to being what they had learned from their parents when they were younger. So that was one book. Then about the assassination, I think the definitive book on the assassination is called Conspiracies, Unraveling the Assassination of Malcolm X by Zach Kondo. That to me is the definitive book on the assassination. He wrote it in the early 1900s, and he actually named the 5 guys who were involved. And then, of course, I wrote a memoir called Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, the Master Teacher, in which I provided especially stuff on what he was doing internationally. I tried to, to include a lot of that in there. So those are at least some of the books I think that will give you like a good, and listen to his, the Message to the Grassroots, Ballad of the Bullet, which I have just quoted in an article I wrote for the New York. I got an article that's going to be coming out in February in the New York Daily News about the voter suppression, and then I include some historical comments from like W.E.B. Du Bois, in which W.E.B. Du Bois said that may God write us off as asses if we ever again support either the Republican or the Democratic Party. He's talking about black. He said, may God write us off as asses. Now this is from W.E.B. Du Bois. I was it's in that book. And then I got a quote by A. Philip Randolph, Brother Malcolm, Dr. King, Coretta Scott King, Constance Baker Motley, all dealing with the whole question of voting and how this whole question of voting suppression, is just a continuation of, I don't know why people are surprised, because these are the direct descendants, either blood or ideological, of the Dixiecrats, they used to be, as they used to be called, back in the early 1900s. The white, they were in the Democratic Party, but they were also called Dixiecrats because they were. I said these people are their descendants, including Jeff, the current Attorney General. They are the descendants of the Dixiecrats, and they are now using more sophisticated. They used to use the poll tax, the literacy tests, threatening jobs, burning homes. Now they do it with strict photo ID selection, relocating polling places. They do it a little bit more sophisticated, but it's the same thing.
I was just going to say it's the same thing, because if poll taxing was outlawed,
Yeah.
To go get an ID, you're still paying the state to vote.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
It's basically just a little bit more sophisticated thing of the same thing.
One final question.
I just wanted to know, what do you think the reason I feel like there's a lot of skepticism amongst black people, and they're very divided once they do have a leader, and they tend to try to take down that leader one way or another before they can really gain that kind of steam. I know you mentioned someone, Jeremiah Wright, and from what I know, a lot of people kind of have hard feelings about how he was. So what do you think what will it take for people to rally behind a national figure again like they did Martin Luther King and Malcolm X?
It's gonna take a more presidents like Trump. I think black people are getting a wake-up call. Because a lot of, to me, black folks, for about the last 50 years, 40, 50 years, we've been living in fantasy land.
Yeah.
Total fantasy land. And we think that we can just, everybody can just, do it. Oh man, everything is, and it's things are going to change. And you're either going to get together and form some kind of national movement, or you'll be forever on the bottom of the pile. People do things sometimes out of necessity. They have to be hit upside the head. And I think there's going to be some hitting upside the head coming. And hopefully that will wake enough people up that something can be done to get rid of this kind of apathetic, I don't know, I cannot tell you the number of times I've been told by so-called millennials that I'm stuck in the 60s. But of course, some of them, right now, some of them are not saying that. Because they see some stuff that's going on that's got them like, oh. I said, well, I could have told you that. I've been telling you that for the last 15, 20 years, and you told me I was stuck in the 60s. But you better get real, because it's going to be no choice. You will either do it or be on the bottom forever. That's the bottom. See, that's my position now. When people come to me now talking about, oh, they shot this person, or they did this, you know what my response is? This is what happens to a group of people who resolutely refuse to organize a national movement to promote and protect their interests. That's my position now. Well, you know, black people ain't gonna do that. Then pay the consequence. That's where I am now. I'm no longer begging and pleading, and I'm just gonna say, if you don't do this, then don't come to me and talk about this happened, because that's the consequence of you sitting on your behind. You're either gonna do it or you're gonna pay the consequences. You're going to get organize a national movement to promote and protect your interests, or you're going to pay the consequences. And I tell that to both my African colleagues and my African colleagues, that if neither black people in the United States or on the continent are going anywhere without the other.
Right.
We'll either do it together, or it will not be done. And if we don't do it together, we will be forever down at the bottom of the stack. That's just no choice. And it's like you don't have no choice. If you're prepared to stay at the bottom, then continue the way you're doing.
Well,
that's where you're going to be.
I would like to thank Brother Peter Bailey, my brother, my teacher, my elder, for being here today. Please just, I know it's a few people here left, but let's just give him a hand. Peter's got to run, so he can't hang around. We can't even do the pictures that we normally do. We'll do it at another time. Peter, David's going to take you back to the train so you can make your train.
Okay.
All right, so, and I will be in touch, and we're going to talk more about bringing the play here.
Okay.
And possibly doing some more reading. So we got to have you come back again when you're not rushing and when, you know, things are a little bit calmer. So thank you so much, and thank all of you for coming out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.